So, Danny, you have some news?
Yes, if my voice sounds weird, it's because this episode is coming to you live during the first time ever I have had COVID-19. We were going to record this a couple days ago, and I canceled because I had a sore throat, but don't worry, I had a COVID negative test. And then yesterday, I went to the doctor to get sinus medicine because I assumed this was just a sinus infection or an allergy issue. And the doctor smartly was like, well, let's give you a COVID test again anyway. And I got a positive on that one. So I am in quarantine at the moment. And if you're worried at home about Mark, don't worry. He is in New York City and I am in Chicago. So we are okay.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I am currently in the middle of my own COVID drama.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, there might be something related to it might be in the cast of the show that I'm in right now. So I also got tested today, and I got a negative on my rapid test, but we'll see tomorrow if I'm, actually negative, and then I'll do what you did and go back in 2 days or 1 day and take it again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's a party.
We're all inside right now.
In all honesty, I'm pretty impressed that I made it to I think it's been about 2.5 years, right? I made it 2.5 years without getting COVID. That's pretty good for me.
Yeah.
I made it pretty long.
And you said that you had like a fever night, and now you're kind of
Well, the issue is just my sore throat. And the thing is, here's the thing. I saw a movie a couple weeks ago with my dad on Father's Day. And during the movie, I had post-nasal drip the whole time, just because that's what happens when the allergies are so heavy here in the Midwest. And I've had it since I've seen Top Gun Maverick. And considering when I know I got... Oh, sorry, I wasn't supposed to say the movie, because, spoiler alert, it might be one of the 10 I do for a game later. Well,
that's fine.
Yeah, I just assumed that with my nose, like my post-nasal drip, it was just allergy stuff. But my point is that I know when I went with my dad, I didn't have it yet because I was exposed to people afterwards. I was about to say where I was exposed to them, which I can't say on the podcast, but I was exposed to people last week. So, you know what we should say about this week's episode before we actually get into it, and we can still talk about random stuff before then? Is that This is a very monumental episode for 2 reasons. First thing is, it is a first feature film we'll be covering. I have a lot to talk about. I don't know if you have a lot to talk about.
I also have a lot to talk about. Okay,
good.
Game time.
Yes, my game is the Letterbox game. It's a game about Letterbox. Sorry, a hair fell in my mouth. The game about the famous social media review publishing website, Letterboxd. What I do is I look at a list of the last 10 movies I saw in theaters, or some variety of that. That part doesn't really matter. I actually just did the 10 films I watched right after the last time we recorded, because I'm pretty sure by the time we record next, I will not have... I won't have watched 10 movies by then, so I saved those ones for next time. But anyway, I have 10 movies here. Mark is going to pick a number 1 through 10. And Letterboxd had this feature where it says algorithmically what their movies are. What is the most similar film. So I'll give Mark the top 5 films. I'll remove films from the same franchise or by the same director. And yeah, Mark has to guess what movie it is. After 2 guesses, I'll give him the year it came out. And then afterwards, I'll keep giving him what the next movie is that's similar to it. Also, Mark just showed off the Second Amendment rights to me for some reason, and I'm unsure why.
Oh, I realized that I'm sitting next to a little blunderbuss thing that I have for a prop, so I was just like,
do you remember my orange gun in school? My great gun? My great orange gun.
Yeah, I think I do, actually.
I love my prop gun. I should find... It's at home. I remember a couple years ago... Actually, it was in 2020, because I went home... Wow, we got the detour in right before we even start talking about the episode, but it's okay. But I went home in 2020 because of the pandemic, and when we were gearing back to go back to work, I had the second graders that year. I can say that because it's 2 years ago now. And we had a Zoom meeting where we introduced who I was, like whose kids were in whose groups. And I just noticed the gun was like at my feet, and like we were doing a scavenger hunt, and it was like, show us something tasty. And I like brought up a cream puff I bought that morning from like a bakery, so every kid was jealous of it. But then when I was like, find something orange, I just looked right at the gun, and I was like, I cannot show that on the Zoom call with these parents here. But yeah, anyway. So pick a number 1 through 10, and I will give you... We'll do 3 again, because I think we like doing 3. But give me your first number, 1 through 10.
7.
7. All right. Ooh, this is probably the toughest one. All right. So number 7. Your options are Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Dumb and Dumber, Dumb and Dumber 2, Big Trouble, Scary Movie. Do you want me to repeat them?
No, I think I'm all right. Was it the Key and Peele movie with the cat?
It was not Keanu.
Was it Superstar?
I don't even know what that is. No, it wasn't. All right, the year this movie came out was...
I'm thinking of Popstar. I should have said the Lonely Island movie without the cat.
Oh, that's funny. No, it's not Popstar either. But your year is 1996.
Clerks?
Nope. The next movie you get is Me, Myself, and Irene.
The Cable Guy?
No. Alright. Your next film. And, well, do you want me to give you an extra hint to this, or do you want me to just give you the film?
Give me one more film and then say I lost.
This is the Simpsons movie. So for the listeners, if they want to try to guess one last time, and Mark, if you want to recap on what all 7 movies are, it's Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Dumb and Dumber 2, Big Trouble, Scary Movie, Me, Myself, and Irene, and The Simpsons movie. And the film released in 1996.
Who's in Big Trouble?
Let me click. I have no idea. I don't know what this movie is. It's a Tim Allen movie directed by Barry Sonnenfeld.
The Addams Family?
Nope. No, remember, I removed the directors. So it was a Barry Sonnenfeld.
Oh man, you're right.
Okay. Do you want another guess before you give up? Because that was not a real guess.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then it wouldn't be Clerks either.
Yeah.
No, I don't have another guess.
All right, so the hint I was going to give you in addition is that the Simpsons movie is the best hint here. Does that help you at all?
Honestly, no, because I mean, what is that short? No, I wouldn't know at all.
The movie I watched in preparation for a sequel that just came out that I'm not going to watch because I didn't like this was Beavis and Butthead Do America. Beavis and Butthead movie. Yeah, you're like,
I should have guessed the. Well, I mean, honestly, I was. You really gave that one to me, and I'm just not familiar with them at all.
I mean, I wasn't either until I watched it, so you're good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, give me another number 1 through 10.
4.
The Lego Movie. Bolt. Treasure Planet. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, and Wreck-It Ralph.
So it's animated. It sounds like it came out 2010s. And I'm going to say it's not a mainline Disney thing. But it is CGI.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I'm just being goofy.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to explain my thought process. And then I'm also I really would love to just rattle things off and keep it moving, and I just cannot think of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs?
Incorrect.
Okay.
That would not be on there because it's directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and the Lego Movie is directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller.
Frankenweenie. That's a bad guess.
It is a bad guess. You want the year?
Yeah.
2022.
Wow. So maybe this was a current thing that you might have seen it in theaters. Do I know it's in theaters? Do I know it's in...
I don't know if you know if it's in theaters. I would assume you would know this is in theaters. I'll put it that way. If you didn't know this was in theaters, I'd be a little confused.
Oh, what's it? No, because that's the same director. I don't know it.
All right, well then you get 2 more films before you give up, okay?
All right.
So the next film you get is Big Hero 6.
I cannot think of a single animated film that came out in 2022.
Really? You can't think of a single animated movie from this year? Not one.
No, except, well, it's because of the way I think about movies is I usually follow directors. So my brain was like, oh, is it Mitchell and the Machines? And I'm like, no, that wouldn't be one of the things. And now I'm like, that probably came out in 2021 or something like that.
Man, if you don't get this, people are going to kick you off this show. People are going to be so mad at you. They'll be like, how can this guy host an animation podcast and not
is it Lightyear?
Yes, it's Lightyear.
Oh, that's right. I don't know if I'm going to watch that before Kevin and I record.
Just be like, yeah, I like the Toy Story movies. Yeah, they're good. Love Toy Story. Yeah, the first 4 were Toy Story movies, so Lego Movie was the 5th most. You know, I consider Lightyear a toy. Like, I consider it in the same franchise. I wasn't going to include the Toy Story movies in your list.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I forgot the key thing, which is
2022.
Well, it's 2022, but like, I don't know. I kind of have ignored that. I kind of put that film out of my mind. It's like, if you gave me all the hints that led to Obi-Wan Kenobi, I probably would not get Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because
Obi-Wan Kenobi is a TV show, so I don't even know if it will be eligible for this list. Even though there's a Letterboxd page. I haven't looked at it yet to see if it's on here. It's not in these 10, to be clear. Obi-Wan Kenobi is not an option in these 10.
Okay. Good. That's a good clue. It's not Obi-Wan Kenobi.
All right, so let's see if you can get one finally just in one. Give me one last number.
8.
8. All right. Singing in the Rain, Mame, The Bandwagon, Guys and Dolls, Top Hat.
Funny Girl?
No. So you didn't get in one, but let's see get it before you get the year.
The Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
Nope. The year is 1969.
Camelot?
Nope. Your next movie you get is Mamma Mia.
Hello, Dolly?
Yep.
Wow.
Hello, Dolly.
Why'd you watch that?
Yeah, well, funny you ask. But first, before I answer that, I just want to get this out of the way. The other 7 movies I watched this week, or that were eligible this week, were Jojo Rabbit, Jurassic World Dominion, Strictly Ballroom, Finding Forrester, Quo Vadis, Top Gun Maverick, and the Bob's Burgers movie. All right. As for your question, why I watched Hello Dolly, I had a pass to the 70mm Festival in Chicago, where if I hadn't had COVID, I would not be recording right now. I'd be watching West Side Story in 70mm. But here I am. But they had a one-off screening of Hello Dolly on 70mm because apparently Disney, well, they booked it in 2020 before the Fox merger went through all the way. And one of the screenings got canceled. And they're like, Disney, can we have it? They're like, Disney's of course like, no way. But like, you know, they're like, well, please, because I don't know the negotiations. I wasn't in the room for it, obviously. But from what it sounded like, they're like, you're allowed to screen it once because you had one showing canceled because of COVID. You know what I mean? So I went to the one-off showing of Hello Dolly in 70mm. And I regret to say I have the basic take that most people have on it critically, which is it falls apart because of Barbra Streisand's casting. Because I think Hello Dolly as a piece of theater... Have you seen Hello Dolly, like, ever on stage?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen The Matchmaker, but I don't think I've ever seen, like, really watched Hello Dolly.
To me, I watched Hello Dolly when it was on tour, and Betty Buckley played Dolly. And obviously Bette Midler played her in the big revival that was famous, and Carol Channing played her in the original. But, you know, it's like she's an older woman who doesn't know if she's going to get remarried. So if you cast Barbara Streisand in that role, and when she's like 24 or 25, of course when she's like, I don't know if I'm going to get remarried, I'm like, of course you're going to get remarried. Like, you're Barbara Streisand. Like, no one, like, don't be like, you're getting too old to get married again. You're not. And it just kind of like, because Hello Dolly is really funny, and the movie's still pretty funny, but it's like all the emotional depth is taken out of it when you cast, like, Barbara Streisand at that age. Barbara Streisand today would be perfect. Or, I've also said that to me, a dream project of mine to see happen would be a remake of it from the director of Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, with Meryl Streep as Dolly. Because I think Meryl Streep would be a great Dolly. As someone who thinks Meryl Streep can be very overexposed, I think she'd be fantastic in Hello Dolly. I will say, and I'll probably actually talk about this when we talk about WALL-E, whenever we'll get around to WALL-E, is that watching this movie with the idea that this would be the only movie to survive 700 years is such an interesting thing to do, because it's just like, it's very adequate, you know? It's not bad, it's not good, but it also is like, oh yeah, it makes sense why this would resonate with someone who only has this as, like, to look at, you know?
If you have nothing else, this will be the movie that speaks to you.
Yeah, pretty much. But also, the other thing I want to say is my audience cheered at a certain cameo in this more than they cheered at any cameo in Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, which is Louis Armstrong has a cameo in this, where honestly I was like overwhelmed with emotion when he was on the screen, because I feel like everything you see of Louis Armstrong is like somewhat degraded just because of how old it is. Even like a crisp album is going to have like some weird recording issue in it probably. But then seeing it in like 70mm in the master that was struck in like 2004 or 2005, it's just like, wow, there he is like in full Technicolor on the screen singing with Barbara Streisand. And it's like, it's not like, it's not to the degree of seeing him live, but like, it feels as close as you're going to get today, you know? Because obviously you can't see Louis Armstrong live. All right, give me the game. You give me the Pride list, right? Because that's what I wanted last time.
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
And it's still June, technically, even though this episode will come out after June. But it is still Pride Month.
Every month is Pride Month.
That's true.
My game is the game of lists, and it is that until we think of a better name, but it is the game where I look at some list online of movies that someone has compiled. I choose 2 movies, and then Danny tries to guess which one is higher on that list. Last time we did the BFI's top 100 films of all time, and this time I have chosen, for Pride Month, the top 200 best LGBTQ plus movies of all time list on Rotten Tomatoes. So,
all right.
First 2 movies are The Prom and Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Okay, so my gut feeling is that you might be tricking me, but I'm gonna go Rocky Horror just out of like sheer like hope. Like,
no, it is Rocky Horror.
Okay,
Rocky
good.
Horror
I thought you might be doing reverse psychology on me.
No. Well, honestly, I picked those 2 because I thought that Rocky Horror would be a little less critically acclaimed. Like, I don't know how Rotten Tomatoes really takes these things into account, or
probably a lot of the reviews on Rocky Horror are not when the movie first came out, so I assumed it would be higher than The Prom. If it was contemporary reviews, it'd be a bit tougher, but considering I know Rotten Tomatoes doesn't really like ever put a hard stop of when you can add a review, you know, I'm going to assume it's Rocky Horror.
Well, that's something. This is the game of lists, and not the game of Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, so, I mean, if it's a list on Rotten Tomatoes, just saying, if it's a list on Rotten Tomatoes,
yeah, I know. Our next 2 are The Imitation Game and Love, Simon.
Ooh, that's actually tough. I feel like they're both like the type of like mainstream LGBT movie where a lot of critics will give it a passing grade just because, like, you know, representation matters. To be clear, I actually like both these movies. I just think they're both, like, good. They're not, like, great. but I wouldn't bet they both have high Rotten Tomato scores. I'm gonna guess, and I don't know if you have the Rotten Tomato scores on you on this list, but if you don't, I'm just gonna say what my guess would be. My guess is that Love, Simon probably comes in around 88 or 89, but Imitation Game is like low 90s, so I'll go with Imitation Game.
Well, Imitation Game is actually 89%, and Love, Simon is 92%.
Oh, so I mixed them up! Ugh. All right.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense, though, because the thing is, like, not that... We can always use more movies about the LGBT experience, but The Imitation Game, there are way more Oscar dramas about it, you know, than there are teen rom-coms, especially 5 years ago. I think that's when Love, Simon came out, so...
All right, I'm just going to do, like, a hard one. I don't know if you'll think it's interesting or whatever. The Handmaiden or The Power of the Dog?
I haven't seen The Handmaiden. So thanks for telling me it's an LGBT movie. No, I knew it. I knew that. It's a spoiler to tell me the premise of a movie. Technically, actually, I know a lot of people were like...
I guess that is kind of a spoiler for The Handmaiden.
Well, I mean, a lot of people told me The Power of the Dog was a spoiler to say, like, it was about gay cowboys, so...
Yeah. But that's kind of what the movie is, so it's... Well,
I'm gonna go...
All right.
I'm gonna go with The Handmaiden.
Well, The Handmaiden has 96% and The Power of the Dog has 94%. However, on this list, The Handmaiden is number 8 and The Power of the Dog is number 7.
That's probably because of the number of reviews.
Yes.
That's usually how they determine that. So,
I like that you were able to provide, like, real wisdom for...
Yeah, I was a little addicted to Rotten Tomatoes in my youth. And by my youth, I mean... Probably like when I was in college a couple of years ago, 5 years ago. All right.
So, shall we talk about The Brave Little Toaster?
Yes, this is our first Detour episode, and to recap to the listeners what a Detour episode means, this means this is not an official Pixar product. This is not an official Pixar movie. However, the connection to Pixar is, according to Wikipedia, which... has sources on it, I'm not just quoting Wikipedia, is that this was originally pitched to be the first CGI film by John Lasseter. However, this is actually my favorite, the quote is, at the time, he pitched the animation administrator and the Disney president, Ron Miller, and Ron Miller asked him how much it would cost, because he wanted to do it with CGI, like, how much this would cost. And Lasseter's like, it's not going to cost any more than a traditionally animated movie. So Ron Miller was like, no thanks. The only reason why I'd use computers is because it's faster and cheaper. So if it's just as long and just as expensive, no thanks. So then John Lasseter was fired, and then this was put on something called Hyperion Pictures, which was an animation division kind of Disney, but not really. It's kind of hard to describe, but this is sort of a Disney movie. There's a reason it's not on Disney Plus. It's like in a weird, just a weird area.
Well, it's really not a Disney movie, I don't think, because it was an independent production made by Hyperion.
No, okay, so it's not. But in the US, it was always distributed by Disney. Like, it was on Disney VHS tapes. I remember very distinctly as a kid getting ads for, like, First Nightmare Before Christmas, and then Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars.
But that's the thing, though, is the sequels are actually Disney products, not the original.
Well, all I'm saying is this company has an affiliation with Disney. They actually are still around today, although it looks like they must have just been revived. Yeah. It was dormant since 2007 until it was just recently revived to produce the Proud Family show that's on Disney Plus right now, because it made the original Proud Family show on Disney Channel.
Wow. The Hyperion was putting out nothing but bangers, and now people are, like, realizing
I mean, if you look at their film slate is not great outside of The Brave Little Toaster.
Oh.
And honestly, looking at the TV shows, the only one I recognize is The Proud Family. So...
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, not only is John Lasseter initially intended to direct this as CGI, this was made at... No, it says on Wikipedia this was financed as an independent production by Disney with the help of TDK Electronics, which makes sense because there's ads for TDK in the film, and the video distributor CBS Fox. This was budgeted at $6 million, so it is a low-budgeted animated movie. But I meant to say, the other Pixar connection here that's really big is Joe Ranft wrote the story of this. Joe Ranft is considered the fourth member of the Pixar original brain trust, other than the three that we did our episode Student Films on, which are Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter, and John Lasseter. And the reason Joe Ranft never directed a film is pretty much he died young. He died in 2005 when he was co-directing Cars. And he probably, I assume, like other Pixar directors who've gone on from co-directors, he would have probably directed a film for Pixar afterwards. You know what I mean? If he was just on his way. But he's a big Pixar guy. He wrote Toy Story. He helped write A Bug's Life. He actually also co-wrote Rescuers Down Under, which we're not going to cover on this podcast. It's because
another episode, another time we say we're not going to cover the Rescuers Down Under. No, because the difference is with that one is that is a pure Disney movie. You know, like, if a Pixar director just went over to Disney Animation Studio, sorry, Disney can have them. We're not going to cover Disney Animation. And there's sequels to this too. We're not going to cover the sequels either because the sequels were made 10 years later, which I think is really funny. And also, I'll be honest, I enjoyed this experience of revisiting The Brave Little Toaster. I don't think I want to watch the direct-to-video sequels to The Brave Little Toaster after enjoying this that much. Maybe you disagree. I mean, I don't disagree, but I actually think that I had never seen this movie before, and I was confusing it with, like, The Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, or something like that, because I remembered those characters that I see now on the covers of the Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars VHS thing. But I had never seen this movie before, so that would be my reason to watch them, is just because that was actually my childhood, and that would be me going back and being like, oh, this is actually what I thought. This was us deciding to watch a movie that we thought that we had seen, and I had never seen this.
I don't speak for yourself. I've seen this before. I do not remember all of it, but there are definitely moments of it where I was like, oh, yes, I remember this. Definitely here and there. But those will come up as we get to them. There's a lot to talk about with The Brave Little Toaster, both in regards to my childhood and as a film. First off, I thought this was a good movie. Like, I thought this was good divorce from nostalgia. Especially when, let me rephrase. When you look at it as a proto-Toy Story, it's a good movie. And it's still a pretty fun movie for a kid's movie, too.
I think that it's really not a kid's movie.
Yes, I mean, we can get into that, too, yes.
Well, I mean, it's just, not because it's like, secretly more adult. I think maybe calling it a proto-Toy Story is fine, but it's, you know, it wasn't a proto-Toy Story. It just was this thing that they did, and they reused a lot of it, but it wasn't like a proto-Toy Story. That's not historically how it went. I don't think it's a kid's movie because I think that it is so, like, rudderless in terms of tone that I just don't think it's not like a kid's movie where there are adult jokes in it. It's like, here's a scene that's like entirely adult jokes, and then here's a scene that's like this old experimental animation from like the 40s, and then here's this old scene here's this other scene where it's like a lot of kids jokes, and here's this other thing, and like, I think it's just, I think this movie is a mess. And I think that's fine. I think that's fine. It's just, like, that's what this is to me, is, like, they just, like, strung a bunch of scenes together. And it's not like it doesn't have a story, but just in terms of, like, theme and tone and arc, I feel like that is... It is, like, barely keeping it together in terms of the story it wants to tell.
It is incredibly episodic. I'll give you that. It is, I also would say that it really, maybe this would bother me if I was like a parent in 1987. It didn't bother me as a kid. Not that I was around 1987, but when I watched this on VHS as a kid. But like, the rules are not consistent at all in this movie. Because a vacuum has to be plugged in to move, but then it doesn't, and then it does again, and it's like...
They really give up on the battery idea after that was such a big deal, like 20 minutes ago.
But like, I don't know. I don't I don't really mind that much. I thought it was a fun time. Like, you know, like, there's a lot of, like, dark moments in here. That, like, ridiculously dark moments.
They almost die in every scene.
And then, like, literally, he gets electrocuted on purpose. Like, yeah. The vacuum, I thought the vacuum
tries to kill itself.
Can I also just say, calling this the brave little toaster, I think the vacuum was the bravest character in this movie. He dives in off a waterfall to save all of his friends when he's not even plugged in.
That's my favorite quote from the Wikipedia article, is the part where they're like, deviating from the original story, we felt like we needed to make the brave little toaster actually brave, and that's why he tries to sacrifice himself at the end. Well, like we have to call him the brave little toaster, but we need him to actually be brave.
I love just like it's just such a, like, in a way, it does feel, as an adult, kind of cheap that at the end he's like, no, yeah, I'm gonna fix this toaster, as if anyone would ever do that. But it's also like, yeah, whatever. I get that we can't just have the toaster die. Like, especially when you see him, like, being torn apart by the gears.
Yeah,
also,
I think, yeah.
You know you're gonna get into the darkness in this movie when you see the AC have his mental breakdown.
Yeah. And then the other appliances are, like, good.
Like, he was asking for it. No,
it's like,
that's actually what I wanted to mention. What? Sorry.
Oh no, I just completing that thought is like there's a lot of death in this movie.
Yeah.
And not just, like, the presence of death, like in The Land Before Time, or, like, the threat of it. Like, things die on screen a lot.
There's a lot of disturbing moments in this movie. There's a lot of outright, like, attempted murder. And I don't know, I thought it was really fun. Like, you know, what I was gonna say is the main thing to me, actually, was gonna say when I say it's proto-Toy Story, is what I think is interesting about the characters in this movie, and it's similar to Toy Story in a sense, is that all of them, like, kind of hate each other. Like, they're all really rude to each other. Like, Blanky's just like, I want to snuggle up with you guys. And they're like, no, get away from me. Like, they're all just terrible to each other. And eventually they get better to each other, probably because they're, like, constantly almost dying.
I don't think that really happens. I don't see that growth in any of them.
Well, it's kind of just like a switch. It's really just kind of a switch that happens. I think it's when they go to the spare parts guy afterwards, they're not really mean to each other anymore. Mm. But you're right that it's not really developed. It just happens.
Yeah, that's how I felt about, if, I don't know, we can't, like, devote segments to each of the show's different threads that it tries to follow. But one thing that really threw me related to this is the scene where Lamp is talking to the toaster about the toaster's, like, new friendship with Blanky.
Yeah.
And it's and he's like, why are you suddenly so nice to Blanky? You were so mean before. And it's like, no, he wasn't. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the toaster is pretty much nice to everyone.
I don't know. The toaster's kind of a jerk. I think the toaster's also, like, I think the toaster should become a meme. And the reason I say that is because I think every time the toaster looks mad, it's very funny.
Yeah. It's like the best meme face ever. A toaster is really well designed.
Also, I have a question that's kind of important. Was Kirby a brand of vacuum?
I think so.
Because the reason I ask is because I thought it was like, that's weird they're referencing Kirby, like, the video game character. No, yeah, it was a vacuum. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Kirby's named after a vacuum. I never realized, like, the video game character Kirby. Because, you know, like, because whenever, like, suck it, Kirby, I'm like, yeah, Kirby, good joke. And I'm like, wait, that's just his name.
There's so much in this movie that is like that I don't think... That's another reason I don't think it's a kid's movie, is that, like, you know, why is the radio always talking about Roosevelt? You know? You need a lot to... Well, you don't need a lot, but you need to know what they're talking about.
The whole thing really doesn't make any sense. Let's be real. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
It's
like,
enjoyable.
I'm not. I guess I can't say that it's not enjoyable, but that's what I'm saying. Is like this movie is just off the rails. Like every scene changes the rules of the world.
Now, I have to get to my personal elephant in the room here, which is what I said last time we recorded when I was like, I'll have a lot to talk about this. I already know. In that, I feel like I must have been obsessed with this movie when I was like 2 or 3 years old. Because my favorite toy when I was a kid of all my stuffed animals was my yellow blanket, which I named Blanky. Which, let me tell you, watching this, I don't know how that's stuck into my young subconscious to name my blanket Blanky. And the reason, okay, to be clear, I understand that naming a blanket Blanky is not, like, unique to this film. I am well aware of that. That said, I'm pretty sure, because I know what my blankie looked like. It looked exactly like this blankie, other than the thing was, besides a knob, it like had this part at the end where you could like, I don't know, like tickle yourself with it. I really don't know how to describe it. And I know I got the commercial for this all the time on my VHSs, and I'm pretty sure I had a VHS tape of this. So I can't assume that my blankie's name came from this blankie.
Interesting that you made that connection, because I never really got what Blanky's head was made out of until I was reading about this movie for this watch, and I realized that it was, like, it's an electric blanket.
Well, I only really recognized it because during the thing, you know, when they, like, do their Toy Story, that's the other thing where it feels very proto-Toy Story, like how they have to freeze when they're in the room.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I noticed it was like that, too. I wish I had more to say about Blanky, like my Blanky. I was ready to talk all wax on poetically about Blanky. About
your Blanky?
Yeah, about my Blanky.
It was
about
a
how,
while
like,
ago.
when I cut it, when I chewed on it, when my dog chewed on it, and I got mad at my dog, like stuff like that. Like,
only you can chew on it. Tell that story.
Keep talking about Blanky. Keep talking.
I'm curious about the time that you just caught your dog chewing on it, and then you were like, no, only I can chew on this.
Well, no, there was a difference. When I chewed on it, it was like, you know, like you just, like you're a kid, you're just kind of sucking on the end of it, you know? You're not really, like, biting off pieces. The dog chews on it, it's biting off pieces. There's a difference. It's like when my dog chewed up our VHS copy of Arthur's Perfect Christmas. Like, that was a number 9. I was mad, too.
I'd feel that way about Arthur's Perfect Christmas. We'll never talk about that movie, but that was another, like, movie that really did some things to me emotionally when I was a kid. Like, there's some real trauma in that movie.
I agree. And I think there's some, oh wait, no, that's not this. Sorry. I was gonna say there's some real trauma in this too, but I was thinking about the other thing I watched today, which was Miss Marvel. So not I mean, there's trauma in this.
There's a lot of trauma in this.
Well, I actually had a note about Arthur.
Trauma.
I had my own note about Arthur too, which is the other thing I think this movie really did to me, and it's during the Worthless scene. I was trying to remember what the name of the song was, the Worthless song. Is that when I was a kid, you know, and maybe, I feel like this is a universal thing. And the reason I bring this up is, I'll get to my point, but I want to talk about the Arthur Marathon first. A couple months ago, PBS ended Arthur, and they had a marathon live streamed on the internet of all the episodes. I watched a couple of them. And one episode that really stood out to, well, honestly, all the episodes, like, gave me, like, this big emotional feeling, in a sense, that the ones I'd seen before, you know, the ones I'd seen before, like, gave me a huge emotional, like, whoa, like, I remember watching this and feeling what I felt as a kid watching this. And one that stood out to me in a negative sense, and I think I might have texted you about this at the time, is there's an episode where Arthur and their DW, they have their car, and they've had the same family car since Arthur was like 2 years old. And the car breaks down. And the episode is about trying to buy a new car, and Arthur refuses to buy a new car because he thinks the old one can be fixed, even though the mechanic's like, it can't be. Now, the logical ending for this episode is to have them buy a new car, and Arthur actually be like, you know what, this is okay. Because that's the point of a show like Arthur. It's to teach kids how to handle with, like, changes in their lives. But unfortunately, this is the episode of Arthur where they got the Car Talk guys to guest star on it. So the way this episode ends is Buster comes over and is like, why don't you call these guys up? Maybe they'll know what's wrong. So Arthur does. And they test the car, and the Car Talk guys are like, sounds like you got a rattle in there. And they're like, yeah, well, what is it? And at this whole time, you know, the mechanic's like about to tow away the car and only give them like $200 for it, you know, when they like spent way more money on it when they initially bought the car. And Arthur, I want to stress here, Arthur like is having nightmares during this episode where he's like, the mechanic is just a con man. He doesn't actually care about our family. Don't trust strangers, kids. Which, okay, fair. Don't trust strangers, kids, but maybe trust the people your parents are hiring to work on your car.
Trust the car talk guys.
So like the car's about to be towed away, and the car talk guy's like, wait, no, there's a rattle. They're like, yeah, we know, but what is it? No, you don't understand. There's literally a baby rattle in the exhaust pipe. And sure enough, Arthur runs out, pulls Kate's rattle out of the car, and the car runs perfectly fine. And so at the end of the episode, it's like Arthur's like, their parents like, you just saved us a lot of money, Arthur, by convincing us not to sell the broken family car. Which is like a terrible. All this to say, I'm pretty sure the worthless sequence in this movie subconsciously put in my mind that these cars, much like Toy Story, and we'll talk about with Toy Story, like toys are alive, so you gotta give them respect. But cars are alive too. So if you just throw away your car, they're going to die horribly. And that is what I think this movie probably really traumatized me with. It probably traumatized an entire generation with it. And they had to do an Arthur episode about it, where it had a terrible lesson at the end of it. That said, actually, you were right to believe the brave little toaster. But that's my filibuster about the Arthur episode of the Car Talk guys.
Well, I agree with you. I think that it's really weird that these movies are, in some part, about being attached to objects. I finally watched Toy Story 4 the other day, and I feel like it kind of gets away from that. But yeah, I think most of these movies are really weird in their, I mean, it's all metaphors for like people, but I do think that they're weird because they're like, oh, don't throw away your stuff. It's important. But like, yeah, I mean, obviously you learn that's not true.
I mean, I also think the central metaphor works way better in Toy Story, where they're like toys which have childhood attachments to it. Whereas in this one, it's like, nah, Mom, I definitely want the exact same appliances I had it as a kid for college.
Yeah, it's like, I want my old vacuum. It's so weird because I so absolutely disagree with you that is a proto-Toy Story, but like, how on earth does that exist if it's not a proto-Toy Story, you know? Like, why on earth would this kid want to take his old appliances with him if it wasn't somehow a reference to Toy Story?
It goes to so much trouble to repair a toaster.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I love his girlfriend. His girlfriend is a great character, because his girlfriend's the one who's like, dude, what's wrong? And also, like, I just think it's funny, because and I think it kind of goes back to that boys club of animation studio, but it's also just like, she's like designed like Jessica Rabbit almost, and he's just like a nerd. He's like, I want to save my appliances.
Yeah. It's like, oh man, you don't get it.
And then she's like, can we just go? He's like, hold on, I'm fixing the AC. Even though I don't live here anymore. I feel like that AC scene where he fixes the AC has to be like an executive note where it's like, the AC's death is too scary. You can't just leave it like that. The AC scene is so funny.
Yeah.
The AC just dying.
You're like, man, I don't even remember like why that exists. I guess it existed to like create terror or create like conflict without them leaving the house, but like everything else creates conflict, so it's like, why does that exist?
Because you think it might be something where it's like, oh, now the house is gonna get too warm for us to like live here, and like maybe the battery and radio will go bad, or like maybe what am I thinking of? Maybe vacuum's like bag will start really stinking even worse now that there's no AC. But no, it's just like, whatever. And then later on, after they decide to leave, you hear, oh, it's a good thing we're leaving. We're almost out of fuses. It's like, what? Like, shouldn't that have been the reason you were leaving anyway?
I guess we should mention that, like, most of what we're saying doesn't need more context than we're giving it. But just in case you haven't seen it, The Brave Little Toaster is about these appliances that
There's
live...
a plot.
Well, no, it's a really simple plot. It's, like... nothing that happens in the movie like really requires you to know what the plot is. It's all so disconnected, but just in case anyone wants a hanger to put all of these images on, Brave Little Toaster is about these appliances that live in like a summer cabin in the woods. And after a while, their master, as they call the little kid that lived with them, stops coming around. So they go looking for him, and they find that he's like grown up and he's going off to college. And most of the movie is about their journey out of the cabin and trying to get to him. And then they get to him in New York, and then there's kind of like a final
I actually really like. I think the third act's the best part of this because of just. I feel like that's when I finally embraces like how stupid it is. I love when movies do that, where it's like we finally made it this far, and then as soon as they almost get there, we cut to the guy going, "I want to go pick up my appliances back at the house."
Yeah.
And then they almost kill him. Basically, they almost kill him.
That's such a great moment when the toaster like decides to jump into the gears, because it's not cut. There's not like a close-up or anything. It just goes up to the top of the pile in the wide shot, and then it holds for a second, and then it jumps off, and then you see this little speck flying down towards the gears.
What I also think is I think the key, I know we mentioned a ton of difference, but the key difference here between Toy Story and this movie, specifically Toy Story 1, because I think that's the only thing you should compare it to, even though obviously there's some elements of Toy Story 3 in here, and Toy Story 2, but Toy Story, and I'd say this about all 4 movies, is smart enough to keep it to a scale that is logical. The biggest Toy Story gets is the airplane chase, which is pretty big. It's pretty big. I'm not going to say it's not big, but compared to, like, how huge this gets at points where it's like, imagine if Toy Story ended, like, Toy Story 1 ended with somehow Andy's about to be killed. And the toys are with him. And Woody's like, I gotta stop this. Like, just imagine how different a movie that is.
And there was also, like, Fantasia-esque singing fish scene.
Such a weird scene. The whole movie's weird. It's such a weird movie. Which is why I like it. I like that this is a bizarre thing that was like, yeah, we'll put it on VHS for kids to buy. Sure, why not? Sure. Kids will like this, right?
I do really think that some of the things that John Lovitz as the radio says are really funny. Like, because, I mean, it's just because of my humor, I guess, but, like, most of them don't really make sense. Some of them kind of do, but then there's one line where he's like, we're hopeless, like a bunch of hairless rats with one leg. And I was like, all right. maybe that's about you as the radio having one antenna.
What I noticed about him is that he pretty much gives the exact same speech after Lampy is brave, and then gives the exact same thing to the vacuum later on, Kirby. Also, Can I just say, I'm shocked looking at Kirby's voice actor being Thurl Ravenscroft, because I legit thought it was like, my entire time, even though obviously I knew it wasn't him because then this came out, but this movie came out today, it's the J.K. Simmons role. Like, it's very J.K. Simmons.
Yeah. Although that's what I do remember from my childhood, because I guess, I mean, I'd have to look at the voice actors, but like maybe Thurl Ravenscroft was alive when the sequels came out, but like I definitely associated that voice with Kirby.
It looks like, yeah, he was in Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, along with DeForest Kelly. Oh my gosh, hey. Wayne Knight is in this one. The Toy Story streams are crossing. Also, speaking of Wayne Knight, we gotta talk about the segment that reminded me of Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 1 at the same time. Which is when our heroes, again, going with such big scale, imagine if you were in the first Toy Story movie, when Woody and Buzz are trying to get home, they get stuck in quicksand and almost, like, they die on screen.
Yeah, and you might mention this, but go on.
And then we get a guy who looks like Al from Toy Story 2 walk up and rescue them from the quicksand, going, finally, some appliances! And then he goes into a monster truck. It's just
yeah.
That was probably my biggest laugh of the movie, just to reveal that this guy had a monster truck. It's
And
never
he has
really
a dog
acknowledged
named
why.
Quadruped that we never meet again.
That entire sequence is so, like, we keep saying this movie's so weird, but that sequence is probably the weirdest moment of the movie.
I like when, wait, do you mean like after he picks them up or when they're sinking?
No, after it.
Well, I do want to say, sinking? When they're sinking, the line that Blanky says, and he's like, "I'm not afraid," I was like, whoa.
It's like, yep, they're all just dying.
Afraid of what, Blanky? What are you talking about?
I also just like the part, and it makes sense, but like, you know, they fall apart, and they all fall down the waterfall, and the vacuum jumps in after them, and then once the vacuum saves them all, they're like, "Thanks, vacuum," but Toaster's like, "I'm sorry, guys, I almost killed us all." They're like, "Don't worry, it wasn't your fault." I'm like, "Yeah, it wasn't his fault. I don't know why you're letting him lead the way." I mean, Vacuum's obviously the strongest, but I'm pretty sure, like, we've kind of proven that if Blanky can just get himself under a rock, he's okay.
Can you... What was your favorite song?
Let me look at them again. I thought the songs were the weakest part of it.
By far. They were so bad. But my favorite was B-Movie.
I think mine was worthless for reasons we already talked about. But B-Movie I do want to talk about, because I think B-Movie is just such like a...
That's another reason I don't think it's a kid's movie.
What, because Peter Lorre shows up?
It's just full of references like that. And it's not just the Peter Lorre type that is in a lot of kids' movies. It's the overall, you know, just... The overall, a lot of the jokes in that sequence kind of depend on knowing who stars are, you know?
Yeah, I get that, but it's something where it's kind of like Looney Tunes, you know, where you watch old Looney Tunes shorts and these stars show up, and it's just funny that, like, there's this weird caricature there. That said, I think Looney Tunes shorts are way better at it than this is. This point, I was just like, why is Peter Lorre? Like, who's this joke for?
It's to give Phil Hartman more lines.
This is the first film ever, animated movie ever shown at Sundance. And it was the next one was 2001, Waking Life. The director claimed that he was told he almost won the Sundance. What's the Grand Jury Prize? Is that what it is? It said, yeah. He said he was told by the judges that it's the best film, but they don't want to give it to a cartoon.
I didn't know the name of the other film that he mentioned, but I don't know, man. I could not tell you what films have won at Sundance the last few times.
Didn't Coda win?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
That's the only one I can think of. Actually, now I'm reading about the release, and this is interesting because it sounds very similar to what's going on now. This is worse, is that, so they tried to sell theatrical distribution rights in the US, but an art house pictures place called Scoros Pictures took it and was going to do evening shows for college students. However, Disney did not want competition, so they moved the premiere date on television up, which prevented it from being successful in theaters. Which sounds very similar to what they've been doing with, Pixar movies recently, moving up their Disney Plus dates, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Alright, The Brave Little Toaster. I enjoyed it. I think there's
stars.
probably more we could really break into here if we wanted to.
What?
Alright, who's your favorite character? Has to be the appliances. Can't be like the girlfriend or the master. Why isn't there a parody of the Master poster with this guy in it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Well, I'm going to talk about something else anyway. Deal with it. Just to bring up our old question about gendering appliances, there seems to have been a lot of debate over if the toaster was a male or a woman. However, most official sources describe the toaster as male, even though it's voiced by a woman.
I think that the toaster is really... The toaster totally does not register as, like, a young kid to me. The toaster, honestly, is like, very androgynous.
Yeah, I would say the toaster is just like...
Like the starfish in Nemo.
So who's your favorite appliance in this movie? Of the main five. You can't say the air conditioner.
I think I liked... I mean, honestly, my favorite was, like... I think my favorite is the lamp, because the lamp seems like, I think the lamp's character changes the least throughout the whole thing. Like, he doesn't really have an arc, but I just really get his character in a way that I don't quite have a handle on the other ones. Like, does Toaster dislike Blanky? Does he not dislike Blanky? I don't like Blanky because I think Blanky is kind of annoying. And I think that the radio is just kind of all over the place, and I think that...
Why is Blanky annoying? You don't think it's natural for blankets to want to snuggle up with other people? They're blankets.
I think snuggling is natural. I think that, like, this is me as not a parent, like, watching this movie. I feel like this movie is just full of things that, like, it would be inconvenient if children emulated them. I think about that a lot, and I think,
you
Lampy
does
actually...
the number one thing, he gets electrocuted to save everyone, so...
Well, yeah, there are a lot of things like that, but, like, I don't know, you might have a different opinion about this, working with children, but, I mean, I do think that there are a lot of things that, you pick up from movies, and it's just, it's not, like, good or bad, but it's just how you relate to the world, and I think... it's like everything is not as good as Phineas and Ferb. This is a movie about appliances and people that are just like whiny jerks to each other nonstop. And I think Blanky is the most like that. Like, zero optimism. I can handle emotion. I think Blanky is a little bit too complainy for me. And would I want young people to see that? I don't know.
Well, I'll say my favorite character is Kirby. Kirby's good. His grumpiness is needed. It's very needed in this movie.
Kirby seems like the only adult.
I think Lampy seems like an adult. He's just like the drunk uncle, Like, I think Lampy qualifies as that. Radio's the only one here does not really qualify, like, as a... Like, these other ones all have very human personalities, and then there's the radio that's actually a radio. You know what I mean? What I like with the Toaster...
faces of Toaster make Toaster seem like much more of a jerk than I think the Toaster is.
What?
I think the Toaster's actions are not the actions of a jerk. I think the Toaster is a coward.
So he's
I think
not
that is
brave
the one
Toaster.
thing about the Toaster that is like an actual arc, is that there's the moment where the Toaster drops them off the cliff and then becomes brave later on.
I mean, I guess. I don't know. Is he brave? He's like... I look at this whole movie, right? And again, the third act is different than the other two significantly, because the entire thing... Like, up until the third act, our characters are active and trying to get to their goal. In the third act, they get to their goal and are immediately almost killed. So, like... And then, in the process of almost getting killed, they almost killed their master, who is not weirded out by the fact that this picture of himself as a child is in here. In this junkyard. Wait, I do...
Yeah.
Alright, wait. I want to talk about... I don't want to pursue that line of thought right now. I want to talk about one other character that we didn't talk about, who I think is the definition of cheating in this movie and its world, and that's the TV. But,
explain.
Like, I do like the TV. I think the TV is interesting, but I think the fact that TV exists, like, as a human that's stuck inside a box is very weird compared to everything else here.
Yeah, I mean, it's... that's a cool idea. I think that we really forget that, like, maybe this wasn't such an accepted trope before Toy Story. So that's where we're coming from a lot, is like, we know the rules, and these are what they are, but back when in 1987, these didn't exactly exist, so it was a little bit looser.
Yeah,
I agree with you, but I like that they got a little weird with that.
Yeah, it's true. Like, the weirdness is appreciated. What isn't appreciated is, as I already mentioned, the lack of consistency with, like, the plug. Or, like, I forgot to mention this also, the refrigerator at the cabin is not alive, but the refrigerator at his apartment is,
Yeah.
The apartment 8113, which is a number we'll see a lot on this podcast.
What did you think of the music in this movie?
Like the music, or like the songs?
Well, the soundtrack, not the songs. I'm thinking about the soundtrack because I thought it was good.
In the moment, I thought it was good, but I would not be able to like single out a moment where the music stood out to me, if that makes sense. But I remember thinking it was good while I was listening to it.
Would you recommend The Brave Little Toaster? To who and to why?
Okay, because I was going to say context is key here. Would I show it? I don't know. Like, here's the thing. Because we keep talking about how this isn't a kid's movie. But would I show this to kids? Depends. Would I show it to a kid at work? No. Would I show it to if a decent Blu-ray copy of it existed and it was like $5 and I had my own kid, would I let them watch it? Sure. Why not? I don't think this is that traumatizing. Like, you know, like it's as traumatizing as like Nightmare Before Christmas is, or like Gremlins is. Maybe it's an 8-year-old movie, not like a 2-year-old movie. You know what I mean?
I guess I see what you mean.
Yeah, so like, I don't know, I'd show it. I think it's good. Like, historically it's interesting, and as a film it is good.
Okay.
I also wanted to say, before we really wrap it up, because I'll ask you your question too. Kevin Lima was involved in this film, who directed The Emperor's New Groove. There were a lot of big animation names in this movie, in the production team. Kevin Lima. Trying to find the other names on here, but I recognized them when they were in the credits, but I can't find them on the Wikipedia page. Oh, Glenn Keane, Kirk Wise, Mark Dindal. Mark Dindal is who directed Emperor's New Groove. Kevin Lima directed Tarzan. There are a lot of big name people on here. However, Mark, who would you recommend this movie to?
I would actually include this in a bill with like, if you like, it actually gave me like Fritz the Cat vibes.
So you agree with the original distributor they got that said they were going to look around at colleges to show this?
Yeah, because I feel like, you know, Fritz the Cat is way out there, but I feel like this is kind of the same thing. It's like, if you want something like really, like, this is going to be a wacky movie, like, watch it for how wacky it is. I think that's a good way to go into it, versus the way I went in, where I was like, all right, let me evaluate this as a children's movie. And then as I was watching it, I was like, whoa! Like, not only have I never seen this before, like, this, I have to, like, change how I'm thinking about this. It's almost, we're kind of, you know, still in the real phase of these filmmakers' career, if I can say something as pretentious. I think that it kind of explains a lot of the movie and how all over the place it is. It's like, all right, here's this cool thing, here's this cool thing, here's this cool thing. Let's put it all together. Yeah. I feel like we're still there, so it's neat as a historical artifact, and I think you show historical artifacts to people in college. Probably a good college movie if you're like our age.
Yeah, I would put this in an animation course.
Yeah. Because I actually do think that I thought this especially about some of the characters and some of the moments, like Young Master, and there's something where, like, people fight each other. I think animation-wise, it's really interesting how they, like, I think the animation is really good.
I agree. I think it, especially for its budget, too. It gives, I don't know, it reminds me of my, the bad direct-to-video movies, but, like, with actual personality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. That was The Brave Little Toaster. Our first detour is done. Our first feature is done. Woo! Now, this week, we covered a proto-Toy Story movie that we disagreed on the level of proto-Toy Storyness to it. However, next week, you know what we're covering?
What?
It's a film that is more proto-Toy Story than this. We are covering the Pixar short, Tin Toy.
It has toy in the name. Looking for the Ocean, a Pixar podcast, is produced by Mark Young and Danny Vincent. I do the editing, and our artwork is done by Sarah Knopf.
Yeah, and you can find us at Facebook at Looking for the Ocean, a Pixar journey,
You can find us on Twitter at Pixar Journey and on Instagram at Looking for the Ocean Pod. You can also email us at lookingfortheoceanpixar@gmail.com.
If you want to know what I'm up to, everything is available on my website, markyoungperformer.com.
You can listen to my other two podcasts, Wise with Ty and Dan and The Snub Club, wherever you can find your podcasts. You can also find me on Letterboxd at Blankmints for all my takes on all of the movies. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.